All right, everybody. I am sitting down with Rick Rock, Vice President of Growth with NFM Funding. How you doing, Mr. Rock?
I'm doing
Dr.
great, man.
Rock, Dr. Rick Rock.
Yeah, yeah. You can call me Rick is fine, but no, it's great. It's good to be here and love being love engaging with you. I love your thought leadership on where the industry is and where it's heading.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting time, and I love following you on LinkedIn. You're always authentically unique yourself. It's always thought provoking, often data driven. And so I really love your leadership and everything you're doing on LinkedIn, Rick. Hey, so I'm asking everybody similar questions, changing it up just a little bit. But Kristen Messerly and I, who you go way back with Kristen, are putting together what we call State of the Industry Halftime Report. And so I really want to kick it off with what what do you think are some of the most important things that have happened so far this year? And could be things that surprise you, could be things that didn't surprise you. But when you think of we're almost halfway through the year, what have been some of the biggest things that have happened so far this
Yeah.
year?
Without question, this is the year of privatization, right? Not only from a regulatory standpoint, with the CFPB pulling back, not only pulling back in much of its oversight, but a lot of the investigations that were ongoing have been pulled back. Whether or not those investigations were, had merit, I don't know, right? I do know that the cultural shift of having a really ambitious, invasive regulatory strategy from DC, that's been completely dismantled, right? So it's kind of the year of privatization. So you started with the regulatory front, and then we have Pulte in the FHFA really signaling on the privatization of Fannie and Freddie on happening sooner rather than later. At least that's what the president has said, and that's what has been the market and the industry is being conditioned that this train is coming, and for us to be prepared. And it's mainly for the capital markets conditioning to ensure that the right assurances are there for Fannie and Freddie, but the market as well is going to be into a whole new um, um, marketplace for mortgage options, because there could be 15 different types of GSEs out there, private investment pockets that are buying loans from mortgage companies, with the anticipated hope and goal that pricing and overall pricing would go down as opposed to up, which has been the fear around privatization. So I would say number one, privatization, right? Number two, integration. Okay, so integration, there's the technology platforms of integrating with the Hallmark acquisitions that Rocket has made, two of them this year. And a lot of the conversations, I mean, a couple of days ago, one of the third largest servicer in the country is looking at acquiring Guild. So we're looking at a vertically integrated tech
But by the way,
stack.
which servicer is looking at acquiring Guild?
I'd have to look it up.
No worries. But so you think that's I actually hadn't
Well,
heard that.
they actually Guild actually put that out in their quarterly disclosures, put that in place, that a large stock investment by this organization, and I'll look it up right now, but largest did a larger stock purchase into Guild and Guild's public stock, and has publicly disclosed that they're looking at acquiring Guild, which would be the integration and unification between origination, servicing, and then the technology just creates a sustained consumer life cycle between the long-term collection of monies related to the servicing activities, and the ongoing sort of purchase and refinance strategies that consumers are confronted with during the course of owning a home, right?
Right.
Could be drawing money out during times of appreciation, or selling or buying investment properties, downgrading, upgrading, through all the different life stages that consumers have. So it's really privatization, integration, and I think the last piece is going to be a real. Trying to, I would say the third piece is going to be more focused on consolidation and compression within the mortgage industry itself. I think what we're going to have, and I think we're seeing the remnants of this already, with even with Supreme's acquisition of Michigan Mutual today. I think that's emblematic of consolidation in the wholesale space and consolidation in the retail space. And let me explain what I think where I think this is going to go. I think the upper echelon, the larger, the cross countries, the NFMs, the guilds, the CMGs, those organizations are going to swell like we've never had production swell before. Okay, and I think what's driving that and that capability is going to be our investments in AI. The hundreds of millions of dollars collectively that's being invested into AI, again, in streamlining and integrating that consumer experience is going to enable the larger organizations to double in their production capacity, their production, their production capacity, with real marginal and very minimal increases in overhead. Okay, and that pure profit and in margin opportunity for the larger lenders simply is not there for mortgage companies that make up most of the mortgage pie. Okay, as big as cross country is, they're only 3 or 4% of the total mortgage pie. UWM is about 8%, 9%. Rocket's about 8%. So as big as these organizations are, the mortgage landscape is very fractured, and it's made up of a lot of small players. This is the time of the next 2 years where those small players are going to start consolidating into these singular larger players. So you're going to see three things happen. One is the larger players, NFM and others, are going to swell in their production volume through production aggregation. You're going to see mid-market IMBs are either going to be acquired by those larger organizations or they're going to fall back and become brokers. Okay. And then how the larger those IMBs, I believe, if we've talked about in the past, are going to end up being connecting to a Rocket or a UWM for non-delegated correspondent purposes, so they can get rid of all their underwriting, closing, funding, back office sort of functions. They'll save 70, 80 basis points on their balance sheet by plugging into one of these platforms, but they still can operate as a full lender. They're still going to have a warehouse line. And then Rocket and UWM, and probably more UWM, will buy these loans off of their warehouse lines to do what? To feed their servicing portfolio. So I think you're going to see a groundswell. It's going to be a weird. There's been a tension over the last 15 years between the pendulum swung from broker to retail or depository to non-depository, and then I believe instead of it flowing back to wholesale, I think you're going to see two very, very strong channels of business. I think wholesale is going to grow to 30-35%, and I think the strongest of the IMBs are going to substantially grow, larger than they have in previous years and in previous cycles.
So I want to make sure when you define wholesale, is that broker, or
Correct.
does that include the delegated hybrid relationships that you alluded to earlier?
I'm not.
Or
Well,
is that like almost correspondent, like wholesale's broker, correspondent is a challenge or a channel, and then distributed retail, IMB.
this segment of the market's always been there. Like IMBs do non-del correspondent all the time, right?
Right.
But
That's what
it's
I thought.
always been 1-2% of their volume. It's been a very, very small percent of the volume,
You
right?
see it getting larger.
I see it getting substantially
With the
larger.
smaller players, the smaller players are going to do more of that.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking this up earlier today. I mean, there's between 200 million and about 700 million. There's about 600 of these independent mortgage banks. There's a lot of them. Between 200 million a year and about 600 million a year. There's a lot of these there's a lot of these organizations that are out there, and so it's one of those things where an independent mortgage bank, you need your first 30 to 40 million a month to make money. Usually your break-even points between 25 and, in fact, Brian Hale and I were talking about this at the secondary conference. About 25 million a month to 35 million a month is generally where that break-even point is for a mortgage company that has underwriting, closing, funding, a head of secondary, a lock desk, IT manager, and all those back office functions. Okay. Most of these organizations today are losing money. Companies that are doing 200, 300, 400 million a year are either losing money or they're just barely making any money. any money. And given the risk that you're assuming, it's just simply not worth it. You
Got
know,
it.
and
So I'm
and
going
A-
to create the category super correspondent. So we got wholesale, which is the broker channel. On the other side, we have
or a
IMB,
super broker, yeah,
and then super correspondent,
yeah.
where really big, not little fractional correspondent relationships. Okay, so
Because
let's
the key is that, Dave, if you and I have our own mortgage company, we could, in that scenario, we could have our own independent mortgage bank and just plug into, like, let's say a UWM, and then they would buy all of our loans off of our warehouse line. Why? Because they're underwriting it.
got it.
And so all of a sudden, you and I don't have 70 basis points a cost of all the infrastructure. We have a phenomenal outlet, and using their tools and their investments in AI, it enables me to be competitive with companies like NFM and other organizations that have already made those investments in AI. Because these are organizations in the middle that don't have enough money, they don't have the leadership, and they don't have the skill set to be able to have a really bona fide AI strategy to really
Well,
gain those
the,
efficiencies.
the only debate I have on that, and and I just know this firsthand because I know what we're doing at Trust Engine with Mortgage Coach Next Gen, where I do believe what we're doing with data to predict the needs of the consumer and get
Mhm.
to the needs of the consumer fast is on par with the largest, most progressive tech companies in housing. I think we could deliver that, and then we're using AI and
Yeah.
automating, that, and we're delivering this mortgage coach experience, which still is the most elite borrower educational experience in
Without a
all of
doubt.
housing. And so we can deploy that for any lender. Now, to your point, when it comes to secondary and innovating with product, that's a whole nother category, and that there's a whole nother cost set. But I'm seeing that the lenders that use us, and we have less than $1 billion lenders. Of course, we
Yeah.
have 80% of the top 25 purchase lenders in the country, including your company and all the companies we had mentioned. But I see where the under a billion, the 2 billion, they can take our tech stack and we integrate LOS,
Yeah.
pricing, point of sale, CRM to deliver that tip to tail mortgage experience.
Yeah.
So
So I see that as a huge advantage on the front end on the lead side. The problem is, and I did a post about this at LinkedIn over the weekend, is that in my work with some of the Stanford AI researchers that some of whom you've met and that we've talked about, they're forecasting of all there's about 370,000 people that work within the mortgage space, and
by the
about
way, is that
100
loan officers or there's
that's everyone who touches a mortgage is about 370,000 people, right? Now, mortgage specific, not auto loans, car loans. That's why some of these numbers are difficult to kind of unwrap if people aren't if they're not sort of judicious in how they look at the numbers. Because some of these numbers, like when you underwriters, closers, and funders, if they're doing auto loans, car loans, boat loans, those really shouldn't count, right?
okay.
And so if you look at just mortgage, the estimate's around 370,000. Okay. And if you look at of that 370,000, 110, 120,000 or so are licensed loan officers. And I say that because, again, those numbers are a little bit skewed because there's LOAs that are licensed, there are processors that are licensed, and so on. But let's just consider that to be the number. And then there's another so there's 160,000 or so people that are underwriters, closers, funders, LOAs, processors, servicing support staff, compliance, QC, QAs across the board. Okay, and it much of the forecast of the next 2 to 3 years is 90% or so of disclosure desk people are going to be fully automated by AI. 90% or so of processors, and this is Stanford's numbers, not mine. 90% or so of processors will be fully automated. 90 to 100% of post close auditors are going to be fully automated. 70 to 90% of underwriters, because most of the loans underwriters are looking at are conventional conforming loans. Those are pretty easy loans to do. The ones that'll stick around will be the non-QM underwriters, where you need the sort of the more human sort of analysis on it. 50 to 70% of closing coordinators, 50 to 80% of servicing support staff, 60 to 80% of the compliance and QC functions. They're all going to be fully automated. So so the organizations that are investing in AI to actually automate those functions, all of a sudden those costs get diminished substantially. And the companies who haven't invested in those AI tools are companies that will be fully strapped and will be utterly uncompetitive because of those costs, right? So they're going to have no choice but to either dip into their net worth and to invest in converting all of those resources over the next 2 years into a fully autonomous structures to be competitive with NFM and the larger lenders, or they're going to have to plug in to a Rocket or a UWM or someone else that's not through a non-delegated correspondent relationship because they won't be competitive.
Yeah. Well, first of all, those are Stanford's numbers. That's a lot of change super fast. And I don't know. I know with AI, it's time to keep your head on a swivel and it's time to lean into that. But I believe that ICE, I know what we're doing with AI, and I know what the leading technology companies are leading into AI. So I have to believe that through tech stacks like ours, those smaller players and mid-sized players will be able to innovate and not get completely left in the dust by, let's just say, the 20 largest IMBs. But I do agree, call it the largest players that are doing the smartest things, they're probably going to grow. Can't
Yeah, no,
argue.
I
Right.
know at NFM we're looking at possibly scaling to about 14, 15 billion with only increased costs of maybe 15 to 20% of overhead. Where typically it'd be a lot more linear between the production growth and then the cost growth with that because um, the old rules of an underwriter can only decision 2 or 3 loans a day, so you only have to budget or can budget maybe 50 to 60 loans a month. That's being transitioned for underwriters to decision 20 to 30 loans a day because of our use in AI. And
No,
it goes
that's
all the way down. The efficiencies just riddle all the way down throughout the organization, which is why NFM is one of the highest per closed loan per licensed LO ratio of any of the top IMBs in the country.
Yeah, no, you guys kill in terms of productivity. And I shout out to Greg. In fact, I'm interviewing Greg as part of this article.
Yeah,
And Daniel Saw is just an incredibly prolific divisional leader. And, his metrics and his utilization of our tech stack is really special. And I do believe, I've said it for years, technology is not going to, eliminate local loan officers, but local loan officers who master technology will absolutely take market share from those who don't. And
absolutely.
I do see more and more that you're either going to lead a team, be on a team, or you will not be thriving. Will you be gone from the business? I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of loan officers that do one, two, three, less than 10 loans a year now. But I think the stakes are getting higher, and the local providers that are leveraging our tech, they're going to be rocket proof. Let's close out with anything else. Just you've got an audience. There's a lot of loan officers that watch this, but there's also a lot of executives.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts?
I would say that geography no longer is the protective barrier around your book of business any longer. Uh, Largely because of technology and largely because of implemented AI strategies to help grow top performing loan officers in their book of business. You're going to get someone like a Daniel Saw whose 800 million a year is largely within a small MSA of Columbus, Ohio, but really because of technology, his ability to build intimate connected relationships with consumers and realtors and builders in Indiana, in Pennsylvania, in Maryland, in South Dakota, for goodness sakes, his ability to expand is going to be like nothing else we've ever seen before. That's why we're going to have these this explosive growth for the top producing loan officers or the ambitious loan officer who wants to be a top producing loan officer, enabled through AI and through the sales and marketing efforts that are being sort of implemented. I know at NFM it's something that's been a real driver for our origination growth and our growth into the top 10, top 11 distributed retail platforms in the country. So I just think that for most companies, having that small mortgage company where you know your realtor, you know your neighbors, you know your consumers, and you feel protected by that, I think slowly but surely those organizations are going to end up losing their connection to those people that otherwise would have been protected because of geography by companies that are now growing and expanding their influence in those markets. So you're going to see more and more billion-dollar originators strictly enabled through the efficiency driven by AI. It's not now that the ability to really scale your influence and to really scale your production volume is now achievable. It's not just purely the superhuman LOs, the Shants or the Daniel Saws and so on. Now all of a sudden, pretty ambitious average producers could very well level up and be top producers nationwide like we've never seen before.
Well,
So
that you and I 100% align on. And my closing thought for anyone listening to this, regardless of whether you're in the field of play, you are a loan officer, you're a team member, you're a leader of a team, or you're C-suite executive, it's all about leadership. The technology is useless if it's not getting adoption. That's why I obsess is my role as chief growth officer at Trust Engine is all about LO adoption. And it's not just adoption of technology, it's adoption of best practices.
yeah.
And so it just comes down to quality of leadership and execution of getting your loan officers to adopt best practices.
Well, you heard me say over the weekend that I feel as though that Trust Engine or Mortgage Coach, I think it's going to be more vital than the loan origination system. I think as AI ends up taking over the core functions of populating the loan application and doing the ratios and calculating income and all these, I think that the LOS, the loan officer, truly, genuinely, for the first time in probably a generation of our business or more, truly won't have to live in the LOS. And I think the more important tool for them is going to be a trust engine type solution that's going to be able to sort of more authentically analyze a consumer circumstance and to build that relationship with them and to give them sort of a wide spectrum of options that are really tailored and very personal to the consumer. So that I think to me, there's a Copernican shift. I think the epicenter of the transaction is going to be the trust engine, whereas up to this point, it's been a Calyx or an Encompass. It's always been the nucleus of the transaction has been the application. Now the consumer is going to be the center because of AI, and now trust engine is going to be quickly switched into the very epicenter of the transaction.
No, we are definitely trying to be the single most valuable piece of technology with the goal of no borrower left behind. Like if you have a need based on your assumptions, your goals, data, we want to present that to you and help you make the right loan and no loan officer left behind. Like if a loan officer is powered by Mortgage Coach Next Gen, which is our flagship product, we want to make sure that they're future proof and they're optimizing conversion right now. Well, brother, appreciate you. Thank you for all the shout outs on LinkedIn. Anybody watching this, whether you're a loan officer, manager, executive, follow Rick Rock. He is always enlightening, inspirational, and you always get whatever he is thinking, you'll know it. So follow him. Hopefully you got value from this. Down below, there'll be a link to the report that we're writing. I'm not sure exactly when we're going to release that right now. We're doing this interview on May 28th. This may not hit the market for a few weeks, but give it a like, share it with other mortgage executives. We hope this was valuable today. Take care, everybody.